Grace, are you there? Can you open the door? She frowned at the noisy voice. It was the usual voice of her mother-in-law. She wished for a bit more consideration. She had been enjoying her comfort. Open the door. Wanting to avoid troubling the neighbors, she reluctantly opened the front door. You can't even have children, yet you think it's okay to just walk out on everything? As a wife, that's unforgivable. Her husband, his mistress, and her mother-in-law were all gathered together. What? Considering the new wife and the grandchild that's on the way, we'll take this house as part of any property division. Please leave. Yes, please leave right away. That's right. Farewell, you infertile. They said it without any hesitation. They didn't realize what they were misunderstanding. My name is Grace. I am a 43-year-old office worker. My husband, Cesar, is a year younger than me. We wanted to naturally have children, but it never happened. After many discussions, we chose to live with just the two of us. I have no regrets. Since getting married, we've lived in an old but convenient one-bedroom apartment. While living modestly, we save money for our own home. I recently transferred to the planning department at work, which I had always hoped for. The tough job in sales paid off, I was promoted smoothly, and I've become trusted within the company. For me, without children, my work is my passion. However, my husband was in a different situation. What? You quit your job again? Yes. Why did you do that without any discussion? I was lost for words due to the shock. I refused a transfer, and my boss became annoyed. And you decided to quit because of that. That's what happened, but actually I'm at a loss. I was unjustly fired. I sighed. In that case, you should sue for compensation. No, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. Why not? I understand. In reality, it wasn't an unjust firing. This is a problematic habit of his. He can't keep a job. It's not that he's unserious, but he suddenly gets fed up and quits. Every 2 or 3 years, changing jobs has become the norm, and each time it disrupts our household budget and our rhythm of life. As a partner, it's hard to say he should endure even the tough jobs. However, we're already in our 40s. Frequent job changes only increase the drawbacks. There are times when I feel fortunate we don't have children. My support alone won't be sufficient for a family with children. If something happens to me, will he be able to support us? I knew this, but as time passes, reemployment doesn't progress as expected. The timing is certainly bad, but age and past career history are also factors. He can't hide his irritation. He doesn't do any housework and just stays at home sighing all day. If he has time, he should at least tidy up the room he messed up. I think I have more right to be irritated. I felt like complaining about something. The house was small, and there's no escape, which made it tough at times like these. I tried to calm down. Fighting wouldn't accomplish anything. I held back my complaints and watched how my husband was doing. The job he eventually secured was a contract position at a factory. It wasn't what he hoped for, but it was better than being unemployed. Let's move forward step by step again. We can overcome this if we're together. That's what I was thinking when I received a call from my mother-in-law. Hello, is this Grace? Mother-in-law, what's the matter? I've heard that you've been cold to Cesar. What? I was so surprised that I let out a strange sound. I didn't know what she's referring to. Are you being harsh to Cesar, who is hurt from being fired? Please wait, mother-in-law. That's not the case at all. What in the world is she talking about? I want to ask her the same. Did you harshly tell him to find a job quickly or clean up? I didn't understand how it came to this. It's true that I have indirectly mentioned things like, "It would be nice if you could find a job soon, or please clean up the mess you made." However, I never spoke in a commanding tone. This is also one of my husband's troubling habits, reporting everything to his mother as soon as something happens. Moreover, he tends to exaggerate the facts. It's also a problem that my mother-in-law always believes him immediately, but I wonder when she will finally let go of her child. That's unfair. Caesar wouldn't criticize you, would he? There's no reason for that. Why would you say that? You think you shouldn't be criticized. Isn't it your fault you can't have children? What? There are things more valuable than a job. Regrets won't turn back time. Why is it considered my fault that we don't have children? It seems my husband is telling convenient lies. We agreed on this together, yet I feel betrayed. He might want to save face, but turning his mother against me to make me the villain is childish. As a couple who have been together for a long time, I believe we should maintain trust, so I decided to talk to my husband that night. Please don't exaggerate things to your mother. If you have any complaints, tell me directly. Let's do that considering our future, shall we? My husband, seeming uninterested, started fiddling with his phone during the conversation. Please listen. Be quiet. I'm getting a call from work. With that, he left the seat. The discussion did not continue afterwards, and he just disappeared into the bedroom. Was he in a bad mood, or perhaps tired from his job at the factory? It couldn't be helped. I had to try to talk to him again later. But the next day he avoided the discussion again, saying he was tired and sleepy. The following day, he returned home late at night from a welcome and farewell party at work. He spent the entire day in bed with a hangover. In the following days, he was late coming home due to overtime and social obligations. He is clearly avoiding the issue. He intends to leave things ambiguous, but that won't solve anything. The baseless accusations from my mother-in-law are painful. I rubbed my eyes as I waited for my husband to return. We shouldn't keep postponing the problem. One late night, my husband returned home in a good mood, humming, "Welcome back. You're up? What a surprise. What's up? Did something happen? I was waiting for you, Caesar." What? He looked annoyed. Why are you avoiding this? You're being noisy. You're acting strangely. You're persistent. If there's something, just write it down on a note. A note. You mean we don't have to talk directly? Yeah. Are you still hung up on that old issue? Really persistent. I was stunned by his words. Has he forgotten our marriage vows? He nodded when I said that an ideal couple understands each other. I used to like your seriousness, but now you're inflexible and oppressive. If you don't want to lose me, you need to change your attitude. There are plenty of other women. What do you mean? Just what I said. Are you having an affair? I've been harboring doubts about my husband's recent behavior. Are you joking? What have I done wrong? I'm telling you, you're being annoying. Do you want a divorce? Don't use that kind of language. My husband clicked his tongue. He pulled a green paper from his bag and thrusted it at me roughly. It was a completed divorce form. Why do you have this? I was asked to fill it out. By whom? You should be able to guess. No, I don't understand. There's a woman who wants me to submit it. I was at a loss for words. Was my husband asked by his affair partner to write this divorce form? Don't act so high and mighty when you understand. You're useless without me. My hands trembled as I clutched the divorce form. My heart rate increased. What time do you think it is? I'm going to sleep. You should cool down somewhere else. My husband disappeared into the bedroom. I stared at his name written on the divorce form. What emotions did he have while writing this? Was his late return that day because he was spending time with his affair partner? I felt foolish for having supported his new job. My head spun and I felt dizzy. I couldn't think of anything. As he suggested, I decided to cool my head. I quietly gathered all my essentials and left the house. A month later, I have not returned home since that day. I tried to contact my husband a few times, but there was no response. My room was quiet and comfortable. It helped me relax and settle down. The sunlight streaming through the window brightened the room, which still lacked furniture, and added light to the living area. The ventilation was also good. When the cool air touched my cheek, I naturally took a deep breath, and the scent of wood was soothing. Just then, "Grace, are you there? Can you open the door?" I frowned at the noisy voice. It was the usual voice of my mother-in-law. I wished for a bit more consideration. I had been enjoying my comfort. Open the door. Not wanting to trouble the neighbors, I reluctantly opened the front door. "I finally found you. It's been a while," said my mother-in-law cheerfully. I pushed back as she tried to barge in. "Wait, please." "What's wrong? What happened? Can't you see? I don't want to let you in." "Well, you're quite something, aren't you?" Surprisingly, my husband was standing behind his mother, who is the young woman next to him. "The new house smells nice. I like it. It's lovely." The three of them tried to enter the house as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It was incredibly audacious. "Wait a minute. How did you find out where I live?" "Why do you ask that?" "Answer my question first. Why are you being so harsh with Caesar?" "What? Leaving everything and walking out of the house like that is unacceptable for a wife. Moreover, the reason being you don't like Tana." "Tana. So that's the young woman's name. I see. My mother-in-law approves of her. Did she say I left the house?" I felt forced out, practically evicted when my husband told me to leave. My husband, standing close to the young woman, looked at me provocatively. "It's a pretty good house. The number of rooms is suitable, and your taste in interior isn't bad either. I'll forgive you for buying a new house on your own." "What?" "But it's impossible for us to live together. Your infertility has been frowned upon by society." "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "You should be grateful for the time we spent together." "What?" I was confused and unable to understand what they were trying to say, tilting my head in bewilderment. "Caesar, Tana looks tired and wants to sit down." "That's right. Sorry, Tana." "Grace, provide Tana a place to sit inside the house." "What? No." "What? Didn't you know? Tana is pregnant with Caesar's child." "Pregnant? I hadn't heard about that." Yet, surprisingly, my heart remained calm. I wonder why. Was it because the succession of shocking events has numbed my sense of reality, or have my emotions become paralyzed? Pregnant women should be respected, you know? It might be hard for someone who is infertile to understand. Is that so? Haven't you realized yet? We've decided to accept Hannah as family instead of you, Grace. We want you to give up this house as part of the property settlement and leave. Yeah, get out quickly. Yes, it must have been hard for you, being infertile. They said it without any hesitation. They didn't realize their own misunderstanding. I cannot give this house as part of any property division, especially since it is my own house that you are asking me to leave from. What? Moreover, we are already divorced, aren't we? What? My husband and mother-in-law were shocked. Was it really that surprising? I had already submitted the divorce papers he filled out. Grace, what are you talking about? We were supposed to start a new life together. I have no such intention. My mother-in-law panicked and my husband became furious. Why would you say such a thing? I bought this house with my own money. What? Their disbelief was astounding. It seems he hadn't read a single email I sent. Do you really know nothing? The night my husband handed me the divorce papers, the days of endurance I had suffered through were released in an instant, enveloping me in joy. My heart was filled so much that I couldn't think of anything else. Could I now live freely? At that moment, my head spun with excitement. I signed the divorce papers with anticipation and submitted them early the next morning at the courthouse. I divided our joint savings in half and transferred it to my husband's account. Given our previous earnings, the savings were almost entirely mine, but I wanted to avoid any conflict. And then I informed him via email, let's discuss further matters through lawyers from now on. With the divided savings and a recent bonus, I acquired a new house, covering the remainder with a loan. You won't be able to get a loan. What are you talking about as a housewife? I was surprised at my husband's condescending remark. You would have a hard time getting a loan too, with all your job changes. What? You don't understand our finances. My salary is more than double yours. Perhaps hurt in his pride, my husband's face turned red and he trembled. Tana seemed taken aback. Caesar, I thought I'd be living in a brand new house, she exclaimed. Calm down, Tana. My ex-husband was in disarray. I had been the one supporting our household finances. It's unbelievable that the new wife and mother-in-law would end up living together. Grace, said my former mother-in-law, filled with anger. This is unacceptable. It's like fraud. Well, who wrote the divorce papers first? It was she, the new wife standing here, who pushed for it, thinking she would support you in the future. It's good that you have a grandchild coming. No, I will take this house, my former mother-in-law said aggressively, breathing heavily. How arrogant. That's not possible. It's a waste for you, Grace, to use this large house alone, isn't it? Actually, I plan to live here with my parents in the future. What are you saying? Even though you're just a daughter-in-law. No, I'm no longer your daughter-in-law. I have nothing to do with you anymore. I might have new encounters, but I didn't mention that to them. What are we going to do? I thought I was going to live in this house, my former mother-in-law said, disappointed. What happened to the apartment you used to live in? I asked. We sold that old property. You sold it. Yes, when I saw you moving appliances into this new house, I immediately contacted Caesar, and we decided we would live here. So, that was the situation. The only place left is the small, old one-bedroom apartment I used to live in. I felt no sympathy to them. Unlike a strong-willed career woman like you, Grace, I was hoping for a stable retirement with a compliant new wife and a grandchild and a new house. She was disappointed. Why would she say such things? I had no choice but to work hard because my husband was unreliable. I'm disappointed. But I'm going back to tell Daddy everything, Tana said defiantly, unabashed. Wait, if Dad gets angry, it'll be a mess. You better take responsibility. Please, Tana, don't do that. The reason my husband impregnated the young woman was that she was a company clerk who, emboldened at a company drinking party, quickly became involved with him. She wasn't just an employee. She turned out to be the daughter of the factory manager. Coming from a flashy high school background, She had no prior experience with men. My husband was her first, and she didn't know he was married. When she later found out he was married, she believed the classic line, "It's over with my wife. I'll get a divorce soon," and she prepared the divorce papers to give to him. She could potentially be a very thoughtful and good wife. I wish her luck. So, that's settled then. I'll leave the rest to you. Wait a minute. I felt fear as my husband tried to leave the front door open. Grace, don't you feel anything for mothers? What do you think about the life that's about to be born? Grace, if you can't pay the property division, give this house as a gift for the baby's birth. Facing my desperate ex-husband and former mother-in-law, I smiled warmly and said, "Congratulations, goodbye." I closed the door coldly and locked it. I had planned to leave it to my lawyer, but things didn't go as smoothly. Given their audacity in demanding someone else's house, they weren't likely to back down easily. Whenever my ex-husband sent bitter emails, I replied, "Please contact my lawyer," and ignored everything else. But the problem was my former mother-in-law. When she left long messages on the answering machine, it was truly exhausting. "Because of you, Grace, I have no house now. At least find me another apartment. This house is too small and cramped." When I tried to get the new wife to do household chores, she told me to do it myself. What should I do now? I often feel like deleting these voicemail messages right away, but they might be useful, so I've decided to save them. The demands may increase. After all, they are quite intrusive people. One day, a visitor appeared at my home unexpectedly. The doorbell rang without any prior appointment, and thinking it could be my ex-husband, Caesar, or his mother, I clutched my phone, debating whether to call the police as I opened the door. However, a man with piercing eyes and a stern face stood before me. I tensed up. I felt like I had seen him somewhere before, but I couldn't possibly know such a menacing man. It might even be a scam disguised as door-to-door sales. "Who is it?" "I'm Smith, the factory manager." Hearing this, I suddenly remembered. He's Tana's father, the factory manager. I remembered that she had been trying to discuss this matter with her father. Caesar and Tana appeared behind Mr. Smith, both smiling. It seemed they had brought a powerful ally. "Please, Dad, tell her. Father-in-law, please teach her a lesson." Mr. Smith's face was marked by frowning and his lips downturned in anger. I was contemplating how to handle any demands for compensation or support for the pregnancy. I decided to call the police and was looking at my phone when, at that moment, this time, "Yes, what is it?" Mr. Smith said very loudly, "I'm truly sorry." After saying that, the factory manager, Mr. Smith, grabbed the heads of my ex-husband, Caesar, and Tana forcefully, apologized to her properly. "What?" "It hurts. My neck is going to break." "Dad, what are you doing? This isn't what we talked about." I watched the scene in astonishment. What was happening? Don't misunderstand. I brought you here to apologize to her. What? I'm truly sorry. I heard that my daughter stole your husband and then even demanded your house. Yes, that's correct. Caesar and Tana began to look unsettled. Dad, you knew about this. Yes. All that talk about being deceived or having your house taken away was all lies, wasn't it? Where did you hear that? Your mother told me everything. Mr. Smith, visibly angry, clenched his teeth. According to him, my former mother-in-law had been pressuring him, saying, "Now that your daughter has taken my son, we should get along as relatives, in various aspects. You can satisfy us by buying us an apartment. Of course, you are free to visit any time." Of course, Mr. Smith firmly refused. I was dumbfounded by such audacity. The person who said that was my former mother-in-law, always making convenient stories. I am disappointed in you and your mother. How could this be? I love only my wife. Stop this nonsense. Stop it, Dad. You're scaring me. You're the same. What? Just because you're my only precious daughter doesn't mean you should act spoiled. Both of you are useless in the factory. There's a very demanding workplace out there. Go gain some experience there before you come back. What? Mr. Smith said this to my ex-husband and Tana, and then turned to me. Does this suffice as an apology? Yes. But why are you doing this? Let's continue to keep in touch. I was utterly confused about what was happening, stared at his face, and then it dawned on me. Yes, it was a long time ago. He was the head of the administrative department of a company I used to deal with when I was in sales. I'm truly sorry for not recognizing you. Due to a business merger, I'm now managing a newly built factory. It's understandable you didn't recognize me. I see. I couldn't believe it when I first learned your husband was working at our factory. Mr. Smith seemed troubled as he looked away. Is my ex-husband causing any problems? He has a poor work attitude, doesn't learn his duties, and takes days off without permission. The image of my ex-husband not taking his work seriously came to mind, but it wasn't surprising. No longer his wife, I could do nothing but offer a wry smile in response. We plan to retrain him from scratch. He won't be coming back here anymore. My ex-husband shrank back, and Tana looked offended. You were always good at training new employees, weren't you? Yes, very strictly and thoroughly. I'll support from afar. Even with the factory manager's influence, my ex-husband's rehabilitation looks doubtful. Ultimately, he needs to make a fresh start and put in the effort himself, especially for the sake of the innocent child that is on the way. There is one thing I regret not clarifying: the misconception that the infertility issues were my fault. Long ago, we visited a hospital together to investigate the cause of our infertility. There was no issue found with me, but my husband was diagnosed with a sperm problem. Although it was said that natural conception would be difficult, it was not impossible. The fact that Tana became pregnant from a single encounter with my ex-husband could be seen as miraculous. Or perhaps it was just fate, or maybe he wasn't the father at all. I don't know, and it doesn't matter to me anymore. I also received a follow-up from the factory manager during a business update. Ultimately, the couple and my former mother-in-law lived in that old, cramped one-bedroom apartment for a while. They were told by the factory manager to try and make it on their own as a condition to live together with him in the future. Although they pledged to save for the baby and commit seriously to their jobs, Tana quickly became unable to cope with the new lifestyle. It was just as I had anticipated. My husband may not realize this since I used to manage our finances, but living on his income alone is extremely difficult and perhaps impossible. If the three of them live freely without saving, the money split at the time of our divorce will quickly run out. Tana returned to her parents' home after giving birth and never came back. Meanwhile, my ex-husband grew to dislike his job and quit. In a panic, my former mother-in-law demanded her daughter and grandchild back, which led to her visiting the factory manager's home and subsequently caused a disturbance that resulted in the police being called. Truly shameful. Everyone is too selfish. However, it's no longer my concern, so I refrained from asking for further updates. I wish Mr. Smith the best. My new home is very comfortable. Being alone can be lonely, and sometimes I worry about what I would do if I fell ill, but having my husband around never really made things better. Living alone isn't different from what I've been doing all along. I always believed that spouses should support each other, but in reality, it was just my husband relying entirely on me. The absence of someone who was never truly needed has not caused any inconvenience. 7 years have passed, and my parents, whom I brought from my hometown, now live with me in my well-acquainted home. Additionally, a former colleague from my sales department days also lives with us. He was once a top competitor of mine, consistently excelling in performance. After I moved to the planning department, the competition dwindled, and it seems he missed our occasional encounters. I felt the same way. Knowing about my divorce, he promptly proposed a relationship, and now he has become a husband in whom I can place my complete trust. Having worked together for a long time, we can talk about anything without reservation. He is an ideal partner. I look forward to continuing our life together. I have been providing financial support to my mother for many years. Despite having already sent over $2,000, she still claims it's not enough. While contemplating escaping this situation, I bought a new house. However, she demanded, if you want to live in this house, increase your monthly remittance to $5,000. Will I continue to be exploited by my mother? No, I cannot allow this. I finally found the courage to stand up to her actions. My name is Linda. I am 45 and unmarried. I once dreamed of marriage, but fate did not bring anyone special my way. It's been a long time since I gave up on that dream, and while I wish I could say I enjoy living alone, that is not quite the case. The reason lies with my somewhat problematic mother. The difference in how she treats my sister and me is striking. I have no memories of my mother doing anything for me as a child. In contrast, she showered my sister with affection, praise, and plenty of pocket money. I was always exploited by my mother, never receiving any allowance or monetary gifts, as they were always taken away. I'm saving it for you, she claimed, but it became clear there were no bank accounts under my name, and she had used everything for herself. I never received a birthday present, and all the clothes I wear are hand-me-downs from my sister. The cute outfits that suited my beautiful sister never looked good on me, making me feel embarrassed. My father was indifferent to family affairs, believing his role was to work and provide his salary. Although we were not wealthy, we were not poor either. However, I always felt lonely. The amount of food I received compared to my sister was clearly less, and I don't remember ever eating sweets. As a result, I was quite thin, and the difference between my beautiful sister and me was even more pronounced. My mother's affection tilted more and more towards my sister, leaving my heart constantly filled with tears. If it weren't for kind friends, I might have turned out twisted. Compared to my beautiful and loved sister, I, being plain, was not cherished by my mother. Despite being a housewife, she despised household chores, and the house was always a mess. Before I knew it, I was cleaning up, and eventually, I ended up doing all the housework. At that time, I was still in elementary school. I took on all the household chores, and this became useful when I became an adult, but I held no gratitude towards my mother. No matter how hard I worked doing laundry or cooking, I never received a word of praise or thanks from her. When I was in elementary school, I was often made to do heavy shopping. Meanwhile, it was normal for my mother to relax in the living room, watching TV and eating snacks. How can I possibly feel grateful to such a mother? She rarely showed up at school events, and at sports festivals, she would watch only my sister's performance and leave early. During home visits, she would say in front of the teachers, "This child is so poor at her studies, it's embarrassing." When I reached middle school, I stopped expecting anything from my mother. Every day, I mechanically handled the household chores and barely had any conversations with her. It was normal to see her and my sister chatting happily. In high school, when I wanted something, I started a part-time job, but my mother took more than half of my earnings as rent. Any resistance or complaint was met with a scolding, "Are you disobeying your parents? You should be grateful to your parents, who's allowing you to live here, and go to high school, she would say, accusing me of lacking gratitude. At least give money to your parents as a sign of gratitude was her constant refrain. Despite my father earning the living expenses, my mother, who did not manage any household duties properly, talked as if it was her achievement. My sister, seeing me being used and scolded by our mother, just laughed. From a young age, she probably felt superior because she was the only one treated specially by our parents. My father was always detached from the family, and upon returning from work, he would retreat to his room, barely engaging in any conversation. During my childhood, I accepted this family environment as normal. However, as a high school student, I realized the abnormality of our family situation and decided to leave home as soon as possible with the money I earned from my job. When I secured a job and left home, I was enveloped in relief from no longer being exploited. I will never be exploited again, I told myself. Since then, I have rarely returned home. I did not contact my parents, nor did they contact me. I thought it was better to remain estranged. However, at the age of 30, my father suddenly passed away. Although I was shocked by his death in his 60s, I had no time to grieve as his death meant my mother was now living alone. My fears about her living alone were confirmed when she said, "Come live with me and take care of me." Memories of my childhood resurfaced, and I feared being exploited again. Moreover, I could see a future where I would be overwhelmed by balancing work and taking care of the household alone. I continued to avoid my mother as much as possible, relieved when I heard that my sister had started living with her. It's just my sister and her 2 children. She does not have a husband now, having divorced due to personality differences. There were already signs of discord between her and her husband while my father was alive, and they divorced around the same time he died. As a result, my sister returned home. I didn't particularly mind this situation, and I felt relieved that the talk of living with my mother had ceased. My mother, too, probably thought living with my sister and her grandchildren would make her happier than living with me. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, but the situation was not that simple. Soon after my sister and her children returned, I received a call from my mother demanding, "Do something. You owe me for raising you." My sister had started living with our mother not because she was lonely, but because of her divorce. Despite this, in my mother's view, my sister had decided to live with her because she is thoughtful of her mother. Following this, my mother continued to make unreasonable demands, saying I should do something too. As I do not have a high income, I wanted to avoid being exploited again, so I kept dodging calls and messages. Finally, my mother even contacted my workplace, demanding transfer half of my daughter's salary to me. I reluctantly decided to start sending $500 a month, fearing that my mother might show up at my company. I thought this would bring peace, but it seems I was too optimistic. I had not yet fully understood my mother. There was no way she would be satisfied that easily. It was only a matter of time before she demanded an increase in remittance. The remittance increased by $100, then another $100. However, she claimed, "Your sister and her children are here, so we need more money," and demanded an even greater increase. When I asked if my sister was not working, my mother indignantly responded, "Do you intend to make your busy sister work? How heartless of a sister are you? Why is my sister forgiven and only I am blamed? My mother hasn't changed at all." I had given up thinking there was any hope, yet it seems I still hope to be loved or appreciated by her. My feelings are a mix of frustration and anger at the unfairness. However, remitting money might also be the best way to avoid my mother's pressure. At least if I send money, she won't nag me. Although I did so reluctantly, it did not affect my livelihood, so I increased the remittance to $1,000. Will this bring peace? No, I still underestimated my mother. She was cunning. She continued to come up with various reasons, saying, "We need money for your niece's school entry fees. The cost of food increases as the children grow. Utility bills are no joke," and demanded more. The remittance I started at $30 gradually increased by $100, $200, and after 15 years, it ballooned to $2,000 a month. Indeed, I live alone and have fewer expenses, and my income has increased over the years of working, but honestly, this amount of remittance is a burden. The business climate isn't good, and there is no hope for further salary increases. Yet, in addition to regular remittances, there are times when she demands extra pocket money, saying, "I'm short on money this month. My living expenses vanish with your sister and her children, and I want to enjoy myself too," says my mother. It seems the solution would be for my sister to work, but that idea does not reach my mother. My sister's children are old enough to not need constant care. Even suggesting work is met with criticism. Your sister is already having a tough time. Don't you think it's cruel to make her work? It's shocking how overprotective she is. If asked why I don't talk directly with my sister, of course, I have tried. I suggested to her, "Hey, why don't you start working?" But she snapped back, "How can you say such heartless things?" My sister knows she can rely on my mother to handle everything, and she understands that I cannot defy my mother. As long as I am a convenient presence for my mother, she thinks it's fine to use me too. It may seem foolish, but it was inevitable that my sister, who was pampered by my mother, turned out this way. She is also one of my mother's victims. Nonetheless, I can't bring myself to feel sympathy. Considering her age, she should understand the situation and change her behavior, but instead, she is content with the status quo, which is the real problem. If this continues, my sister might become a parent who exploits her own children just like our mother. That is my biggest concern. Her children, now high school and middle school students, must have their thoughts on observing their grandmother, who lives with their mother. I hope they grow up healthy, but I fear they might end up being exploited by my sister in the future. I absolutely want to avoid that. If that happens, my future would be bleak. I've become calm enough to think about this. Am I satisfied with a life where I continue to be exploited by my mother and sister? I've decided I no longer want to dedicate my life to them. I've been sending remittances to avoid trouble, but recently I've become calm enough to think about my situation. Maybe it's time to escape. After sending remittances for 15 years, I feel I have sufficiently repaid my mother for raising me. As for my sister, the debt I owe her is virtually non-existent. We have never supported each other, and I have never felt love from my sister. In fact, she looks down on me just like my mother does. Accepting this fact, I took my passbook in hand. Despite dedicating most of my income to remittances to my mother for a long time, I managed to save a little. Looking at the balance in my passbook, I made a significant decision. It was the start of a new life. I will start a new life from today, I decided, and immediately began checking real estate websites. I then resolved to visit my mother to tell her I'm moving out of state. When I returned home after a long time and brought up the topic, my mother looked at me sternly and with surprise. Her stern gaze always made my heart shrink. Though I wanted to start a new challenge, I felt small in front of that gaze. Meanwhile, my sister showed no interest in my story, laughing at the TV. The house was as messy as ever, and the moment I walked in, I remembered being ordered by my mother to clean up. She still seems to think of me only as someone to do the housework. But I ignored her commands and continued talking about my moving plans, though I was worried about her reaction. I proceeded without raising my face. "What will you do about your job?" my mother asked. "I've requested a transfer to a branch of my current company at the new location. If the transfer doesn't work out, I plan to look for a new job there," I answered. "Oh, and where is this new house of yours?" my mother asked. "Oh, it's a bit old, but I worked hard to buy it," I replied. I had no intention of revealing the specific location. This move is to put distance between me and my mother. "So, where is it?" my mother pressed again. I pulled out a flyer from a real estate agent and showed it to her. After visiting several real estate agents, I finally found a property with ideal conditions that I could barely afford with my savings. The flyer featured a photo of a somewhat old but spacious house. "What this? Why did you choose such a big house?" my mother exclaimed in surprise. "Well, I thought about various things," I replied vaguely. "Are you stupid? It's unreasonable for you to live alone. You always lack proper thinking." "Oh, how shameless," my mother criticized. I had expected it, but her reaction was harsh. "If you have that much money, you should increase the remittance," she said. Those words made me tremble. It was the most important thing I needed to discuss today. More significant than the move, and it required much more courage. I took a deep breath and said to my mother, "Actually, I have something to talk about. I can no longer afford to send remittances." What my mother responded. I had been waiting for this moment. I was truly scared. Although my mother was getting older and weaker, it wasn't easy to erase the ingrained belief that parents are absolute that had been instilled in me since childhood. But if things were to continue as they were, I might have to continue sending money to my sister even after my mother passed away. Thinking this, I mustered all the courage I had and announced my decision. "I've bought a house and used up my savings. There's a mortgage to pay. I really can't afford to send you money anymore." "What? You must be joking, you ungrateful child," my mother exclaimed. "If it's financially tough, either of you should work," I retorted. It was clear that if I stayed at home, I would just continue to be yelled at. Unable to endure it any longer, I decided to confront my family, but I could see a future where I would be criticized by both my mother and sister and be defeated by them. Therefore, I made the only choice I could to escape. I quickly stood up and walked to the entrance. "Wait a minute. Do you think that's acceptable?" my mother said. "I've had enough. Goodbye," I said, and left the house. "You ungrateful child," my mother's voice echoed behind me, but I did not look back. Until the end, my mother did not show gratitude and insisted that I should continue sending remittances. I was just a cash cow to her. I believe this is the right thing. Even if I am criticized for being ungrateful, my actions are not wrong. Reassuring myself, I kept running. My previous apartment was close to my parents' home, but my new house is much farther away. The new house is far enough that my mother cannot easily visit, which gives me a sense of security. "Finally, I have my freedom," I muttered, feeling lighter. However, 1 month later, an unexpected call came from my mother. Seeing Mom on the caller ID, I had a bad feeling. Ignoring the call seemed like it would lead to trouble, so I reluctantly answered. I've never known my mother to call without ominous news. When I picked up the phone, I heard an unusually cheerful voice. "Hey, Linda. How are you?" "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, and she replied, "This place is great." "Where are you?" "Are you on a trip?" I asked, as it wasn't unusual for my mother and sister to go on trips with the money I sent. Thinking about the intended purpose of the remittances brought sadness. But this time, it didn't seem to be about them boasting of a trip. "Actually, where do you think we are?" my mother said, making it sound like a riddle. Although I had strong words I wanted to say, I replied hesitantly, "I don't know where you are." My mother chuckled smugly and revealed, "Actually, we're at your new house." Shocked, I exclaimed, "What?" "Yes, we figured out the location from the flyer you showed us." "Actually, we've already moved in," my mother revealed. Stunned, I shouted, "You moved in?" "We just came to check it out with your sister. But the house is ready to live in. All the furniture is set up, and the fridge is full of food. It's like you've already moved in completely. You should have told us you were living here already." All the furniture and appliances are brand new, so we didn't need to bring anything from the old house. So we'll be living here from today." "What?" While I panicked, my mother and sister were happily chatting on the other end of the phone. "Wow, isn't this the latest massage chair? It's easy to place in a big house." "Linda, were you planning to eat a fancy steak by yourself?" "We'll eat that. This big TV and sound system are wonderful. Look at this fine leather sofa." "Oops, I spilled some food. Hearing this, I felt faint. "Hey, Mom, how did you get into the house?" "How?" "The door was unlocked, so we just walked in." "You walked in? More importantly, Linda, where are you now?" "It's very careless of you to leave the door unlocked. We'll keep an eye on the house for you. Actually, if you want to come back in, there's a condition." "What?" While I was panicking, my mother was probably smirking on the other end of the phone. "If you want to live in this house, increase the remittance to $5,000 a month." "What? Didn't I tell you I'm not sending remittances anymore?" "You really thought that I would allow you to do that? I'm going to lock all the doors of the house so you can't get in. If you want to live in this house, you need to increase the allowance to $5,000 a month. Oh, and since we'll be living together in this luxurious house, let's not call it remittance anymore. It's an allowance. You will give me $5,000 every month. There's no way I can just give you that much money. If you can't pay, that's fine. I'll take the house. You can have the old house I used to live in." "Wait, Mom. What about the kids if you're going to live in my house?" "It seems my mother and sister are together right now." "What happened to them?" I asked, and she replied, "They've moved out." "What do you mean?" I asked my sister, and she responded grumpily, "Hanf." Both of them started saying, "We don't want to live together, they went to their father's. I just told them to work part-time to bring some money home." I felt dizzy. In the end, my sister was trying to exploit her children just like my mother. It's no wonder my nephews wanted to leave. However, I felt relieved to hear that story. They should be able to lead a decent life with their father. I've always thought they shouldn't be under my mother and sister, so at least that worry is gone. Taking a moment to calm my heart, I took a deep breath and declared, "Mom, let's end this. I won't send remittances anymore. Absolutely no more remittances. If you say that, you won't be able to enter this house. That's fine. I don't intend to live with you or my sister anymore, and I don't want to have anything to do with either of you." I finally said it. The words of disownment to my mother. I should have made this decision sooner. Not just putting some distance, but I should have clearly declared disownment. It took a long time to muster this courage, but now there is no hesitation. I've decided to disown both of you, I emphasized again. My mother seemed flustered on the other end of the phone. She must have sensed my changed attitude. "Fine, do as you like. But I'm living here." That was my mother's retaliation, but it no longer affects me. Calmly, I said to my mother, "Mom, calm down and listen." "What is it?" "I am calm. That new house, I've actually demolished it already. So we're taking this house because it's what? What?" As my mother was confused, I reiterated the fact. "The place where I bought the new house has already been cleared. That dilapidated house is gone." "What?" "But this house is magnificent, and all the furniture and appliances are here." "So Mom, where exactly are you?" Did you check the nameplate?" "Nameplate." As she responded, my sister's surprised voice was heard in the background. "Wait, Mom, the nameplate here has someone else's name on it." "What do you mean?" "Linda, did you get married and change your name? So, calm down. That house isn't mine." While my mother was panicking, I responded calmly. During the call, my mother was at a loss for words. At that moment, I picked up a brochure from the real estate agent that I had by my side. I had asked about the surrounding information when I went to see the property. Remembering this, I recalled the real estate flyer I had given my mother. "Mom, you said you went to that place with the flyer I gave you, right?" Yes, the location was exactly like the house in the photo on the flyer. That house in the flyer actually had several similar properties. Did you know that? What? There are several luxury houses in that area, and the house on the flyer was one of them. The house you are in was in excellent condition and priced high. It was out of my reach, and a new owner was found immediately, according to the real estate agent. What? The place I bought is a bit away from that area. It's an old property actually intended for demolition and very cheap. Like I said before, I've already cleared the site and plan to build a small house there. I intend to use the extra space as a rental garage. What's going on? I'll continue working while starting a side business with the rental garage. But the door was unlocked. Someone must have forgotten to lock it, or they were planning to come back soon. Either way, being so careless could lead to people like you trespassing. Trespassing? Yes, that's because it's someone else's house. Is that true? Who knows? But the truth will become clear soon. What? At that moment, a commotion suddenly started in the background on my mother's end. There was the sound of running and shouts of thief. "No, we're not thieves," my sister exclaimed as someone else was shouting. It seems the actual residents of the house had arrived. "Linda, this is your fault. Do something." What should I do? As always, I live in an apartment near my parents' home. Although I had cleared the intended site for my new home, no building had yet been constructed, making it impossible to move in. My mother and sister were quite far away, more than 3 hours by train or bus from here. What do you expect me to do? It seemed my mother realized that her demands were unreasonable, as she fell silent. Even if she had been nearby, I had no intention of resolving her issues. But as I thought this, I suddenly heard a noise. It seemed my mother had dropped her phone. All I could hear were the screams of my mother and sister shouting, "No, no." It's not like that, followed by a voice saying, "This is the police, don't move." It felt like something out of a drama. I quietly hung up the phone, wishing I could have witnessed the scene. Later, a local newspaper reported in a small section about a parent and child who had trespassed into someone else's apartment. I was not involved. The police had called me to possibly act as a guarantor or to take responsibility for them, but I declined, stating I had already disowned them. Ultimately, my sister's ex-husband dealt with the situation, and afterward he too cut ties with her. Trespassing is a criminal act, and as a result, my sister lost the ability to see her children. If my nephews wanted to see their mother, they could, but it seemed they had no desire to meet her. I wondered how my sister had treated them while they lived together. Perhaps she had imposed the same household duties on them that my mother once forced upon me. Thinking about this was distressing. When I apologized over the phone, her ex-husband also expressed his frustration, saying my ex-wife's actions have been a headache. We both repeatedly shared our feelings over the phone. My nephews, now away from my sister, are reportedly living happily and brightly, which relieved me. However, the problems with my mother and sister are another story. After various upheavals, the matter was finally settled through a compromise. If theft had been the goal, the settlement would have been high. But as the intent was residential intrusion, the settlement was about $2,000. It seemed not to be a significant loss for my mother, but in reality, it was different. That $2,000 was apparently her last savings. Including my father's inheritance, none of the $2,000 I sent monthly was left. Naturally, money runs out when spent on luxury dining, travel, beauty treatments, and buying branded goods. Just thinking about the situation being so bad that she demanded more than double the remittance was frightening. Making the decision to move and cut ties with my family was undoubtedly the right choice. If I hadn't made that decision, I would still be exploited by my mother. After being released and the settlement was completed, my mother returned to her old house. She continued to demand remittances, so I blocked her calls and moved to a temporary apartment until my new house was completed. If I hadn't taken this measure, they would have barged into my house. The temporary apartment is very close to my new home. The transfer at my workplace was approved, and I began life in a new environment. My new colleagues are all kind, and it seems like I will be able to enjoy my work as before. My mother and sister, who broke into my home, will not attempt to approach my new house. They are not even in a position to do so after the major commotion during the break-in, witnessed by many. Even though my new home is far from the scene of the incident, they wouldn't have the courage to come here. As a result, I am living very peaceful days. Later, it seemed they sold the family home. Relatives refused to lend money to my mother, who continued to solicit funds elsewhere and was often a nuisance. Their financial situation appears quite dire. Relying only on my mother's pension, it is difficult for her and my sister to make ends meet. My sister continues to avoid work, and despite this, they both continue to waste money and have ultimately fallen into considerable debt. The proceeds from selling their family home were minimal, and after paying off debts, nothing was left. They moved to a cheap, run-down apartment and often argued. My mother yells at my sister to work, while my sister criticizes my mother's indulgence. No one visits them now. They've had their easy days now, it's their turn to struggle. It's none of my business. Overcoming the fear ingrained since childhood that parents are to be feared was hard and required great courage. However, even a little courage to move forward can dramatically change your life. Small acts of bravery bring significant changes. Gazing at the construction of my new home progressing smoothly, I imagine a bright future and smile contentedly.